it go private or is it
You
just
will
finished?
you will stay on at the end. Yeah, definitely. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning, everyone. I might need to lose these glasses because I think you're getting a lot of glare this morning. I'm not in my usual space, right? So, but good morning, everyone. If you're joining us live on LinkedIn, good morning. If you're joining us on the YouTube, good morning. I have got the incredible Yam. Do you know what? It's always really cool to have people that have been the other side of the screen or in the comments to then get them this side. And as well, also, Yam, I feel like you're one of these people whose names I probably butchered several times this side when I was reading it in the comments. Right. So for anybody that is watching, just pronounce your given name for us, first name and surname, because I think it's so lovely.
You did a good job
Oh,
with it. So that
thank
way
you.
it's Nyambe, Nyambe. It looks threatening, but I have to sort of
Oh,
say if you put the energy in and maybe sing it a little bit, it becomes a little bit easier. But I even said that Yam is totally fine, so don't worry about that.
oh, just say it again. When you say it, it's just like it just like rolled off the tongue, and it just sounded so lovely. So just say it again
Nyambe,
first.
Nyambe,
Nyambe, Sumbanyamwe,
Nyambe.
Sumbanyame, and it's all right. My live is covering your name slightly. And what's your heritage? Where's the name from for those that are interested?
So I was born in Lusaka, Zambia, but it's a Lozi name. So my dad's tribe was very close to the wonderful river. So our wonder of the world is the Victoria Falls. So that's where the name comes from.
Nice, amazing. So look at this, right? We're bringing some culture already to Friday morning LinkedIn Live, and we've already got our first good morning, Adrian. Adrian, you've won the award again for the first good morning. Good morning, Adrian. And the weather is sunny. I can literally just about see the sun. I'm in a different space today. I'm in Birmingham because I'm on my way up to Leeds today. Long day. It's sunny in Cornwall. Good morning, Sylvia, Anna as well. Really lovely to have you joining us as well from Cornwall, Sylvia. I'm assuming you're on the coast there. But yes, if you are joining us live, please do say good morning in the chat. Let us know how your week has been. Let us know how the weather is. Yam, where are you based again? Are you London or?
No, I'm not actually. It's just I think
No.
I spend a lot of time down there with work, but I'm
Yeah.
actually based near Hull, up on the East Coast.
Okay.
So I won't be too far away from you. You travel up to Leeds.
Yeah, I'm heading up to your part of the world, and how is the weather where you are? Yeah, because this is we're in the UK, so we have to start every conversation with the weather, right?
So often I spend a lot of time on calls with people further down south, and the weather tends to be better. So I look at my window. It's not
Yeah.
sunny today, but it's nice and it's fresh. I enjoyed a walk with the dog this morning, so I won't complain about it.
Nice. And it's interesting. So my daughter lives in Birmingham. Anybody that knows I live in Shropshire, right? My daughter calls where I live the north. She's like, oh, but it's cold in the north. I'm like, Shropshire's not the north, like, and she only lives in Birmingham. Good morning. I'm going to have to put my glasses on, otherwise I won't be able to read. Good morning, Adama. Hopefully I'm pronouncing your name. What a beautiful name, Adama. Good morning, and good morning, LinkedIn user. Apologies, I can't see. Your name hasn't come up in our tech here, but yeah. Good morning, everybody. This is going to be an incredible conversation with Yam. For anybody that doesn't know Yam personally, you go by Yam, right? Is that a name that you've kind of given yourself, or did people give it you? Or
a good friend of mine, he's called Patrick McDonald. I think we must have been about 6 years old in the playground. He couldn't pronounce my name, and Yam was what it was, and it stuck.
Okay, yeah, which is it's very common, isn't it, with with names from across various diasporas, right? Whether it's kind of the African, Asian diaspora, or even sometimes Eastern European as well, in terms of some of the sounds that people struggle with as well. Adama's put, great to see you, Yam. So you got some fans in the comments. Yam, good morning, Hansa. How are you doing? And Hansa's put a sunshine post as well. Also, good morning, Wadsy. Hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly. And good morning, Savannah Hanson. How are you doing, Savannah? I think I'm in your home city this morning, in Birmingham. So I hope you are all well. Right. Yam, we have got a tradition on this LinkedIn Live. You've watched a few of these LinkedIn Lives before, right? So I don't know whether you've watched it since we've been doing where are my notes? Since I've been doing the introduction from Claude. So Claude now writes your bio, right? So my guest today is Nyambe, founder of the Black Sherpa and the 29K Club. With nearly 2 decades in life sciences, he spent years inside organizations watching who got developed, who got overlooked, and why, including 4 years as a career pillar lead for an employee network, where he led a program that saw 80% of participants progress within a year. That's amazing. His work sits in the gap most organizations struggle to fill between formal development programs and how progression actually happens. Inside the 29K Club, he helps ambitious professionals, particularly those navigating bias or being the only one in the room, build the visibility, sponsorship, and influence that effort alone rarely delivers. Nyambe, welcome.
Thank you, Claude, and thank you. I'll be honest, I don't use Claude as much, so I'm starting to move into it now. So really fascinating to hear how I'm showing up in that space.
Yes. Yeah. Marks out of 10 for Claude. How did Claude do with your intro?
That's a strong 8. I like it. There's obviously anything AI related. There's a little refinement that needs to make happen, but definitely on point.
Always. Yeah. Good morning, Patricia. Good morning, love. Yam, love yam. It is my favorite Ghanaian food. I love yam, and yam is definitely made its way into the Caribbean food as well, right? Yam and green banana, right?
Little sweet potato over here. I can take it.
Yeah, for sure. If we get on, Patricia, if we get onto food, we could be here forever, just talking about everything across the diaspora and how these things kind of have moved over, like between the African and Caribbean diaspora as well. My mum loves yam, right? Yellow yam, white yam, whatever, all of the different, right? But thank you, Patricia, for joining us as well. So we're going to get into this. Just so tell me about, before we sort of like dive into the questions, why did you create the spaces that you've created? And you've got 29K Club and Black Sherpa. So just explain those two things and how it came about, like how and why you built these spaces.
So I've worked in the pharmaceutical industry for a long time, best part of 20 years, as you mentioned earlier on. And I've always focused on the people aspects of business, whether that's from a learning and development perspective, whether that's from a strategy and operations perspective. But I always regard people as the most valuable and most important resource that any organization has. So whether that's about how we educate them and support them, whether it's about the tools and resources that I have to allow them to be excellent at the job, or whether it's around the culture that you're able to build that allows organizations to attract great people, to nurture and build them, and to see them sort of progress. And always felt really lucky to work for organizations that valued that type of work and really made it an important part of how things get done. But I suppose towards the latter stages of my time there, I got involved with an employee resource group, which coincidentally happened to coincide with George Floyd. And that was a real eye-opening moment for me in lots of different ways, and sometimes sort of reveals a little bit of naivety. I'd worked for an organization for a long time. Was lucky to be part of a brilliant group of people starting the chapter of an ERG that actually had ran within the global part of that business for the best part of 50 years at that point. So really established, but new to the UK. And as I started a role in that leadership team, I think the thing that caught me was how my network of Black employees within the business that I'd been at for such a long time literally just ballooned from nowhere. And I'm sat there thinking, how did I not know this person is doing this job in this space so close to me? So that probably a little bit of a failing on my part. But then I suppose beyond it, I was charged with being focused on like the career aspect of that. And as I started having conversations with more people like me across a business that I loved, and I often talked about how fortunate I felt I'd been to have had a lot of investment, a lot of development, a long line of great managers that invested in me and supported me, opportunities. Not everybody felt exactly the same about what, again, I still believe is a brilliant organisation. So that role allowed me to start to play with and think about different ways that we can support and address that. And actually in that, I think I learned a few things. Some of what was the opportunities I had were really as a result of me and how I work, how I operate. And for a lot of people that maybe hadn't had the same opportunities, like anywhere, there was the parts of that which was based on the systemic issues that we have in the world today. But so much of it was based on people just not having the right knowledge or information at the right time, or being able to connect themselves to opportunity. So I had the opportunity within the organisation to start to play with actually how do you help and support people to take ownership and to lead their own careers. And that sort of went into a couple of programs. I've now been able to start a business that allows me to take that same ethos, that same work, but do it at scale across an industry that I love. And I'm really starting to think about how I can deliver more value to more people in that light. And I just know, and I see all the time, that there's inequalities in terms of opportunity, but actually some of that can be addressed with the right information, the right time. And that's what I'm really sort of charging myself in my work, either through the Black Sherpa, which focuses on supporting organizations with people, culture and performance, or the 29K Club, which starts to completely dismantle how people think about leading their careers and helping them to really build the clarity, the confidence and community that can enable them to be successful on their terms.
Yeah, it's really interesting. As you were talking, a part of your story, you talked about like being in a company and you having one experience and being like, you know, I feel invested in and there are opportunities, and other people having a completely different experience almost. And what would you put that down to? Like, are you able to like pinpoint it to, you know, and it's probably not one thing, but what are some of the things that you would put that down to, why you would have a different experience in the same company? Because I sort of feel similar to that. You know, I've been in organizations where I've often been the only one, or there's just been a couple, and I might have an experience that's different to somebody else. Just what are your thoughts on that?
It's a hard one, right? And the answer is not one that everyone's going to be palatable for, but the reality is like a big chunk of it is luck. And the other reality of that is, you know, life isn't fair in so many ways. I often sort of start that as a premise. As long as we can, or as soon as we can see where those disparities are and we can acknowledge them, there's something really empowering in that, in terms of you can make choices to do things differently that give you a better opportunity. And when we sort of think about in organizations, and particularly big, complex organizations, the development is there. That's not even a question. The development is there. And there's brilliant opportunities to develop. But the reality is it's not evenly distributed and not everybody knows how to access it. And that for me is where the work is. So that there isn't one crystallized thing. It's just this is how life works. So a big part of my charge now is actually how do you shine a light on how people can create or position themselves for opportunity, and then change that narrative for themselves. And if you can do that for yourselves, you know, it's funny how all of a sudden you can do that for other people, because the other thing that I often see is like somebody's watching that's going to need your example a little bit further down the line. Even those little things make such a big difference.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said there, and I know you said about luck, but here's the thing. So I've now met you in person, right, in real life, and I know what your personality is like. And my guess is that actually, in the workplace, and I'm guessing maybe over your career, I'm guessing that you haven't struggled to like make connections and build relationships and build rapport, etc. And you know, that maybe goes a long way to kind of helping to seize that luck, right, or helping to seize those opportunities that might be available, is my guess. So I know you put it down to luck, but I've met you, right, and I know it's not all luck.
So I think the same with anybody when we sort of think about luck. I think there is definitely something around that. The harder that you work, or if you work with that intent, you become more lucky. So I think there's ways you can definitely create that luck for yourself, right?
I think Richard Branson has a saying like that, doesn't he? Something like, the harder I work, the luckier I seem to get, or something. And okay, perfect. So some of the bits of advice that get given to people, I mean, you know, if we think about, for example, in the certainly in the African diaspora, that advice of, you know, you got to work twice as hard, etc., right? Which we know where that's come from, and it kind of came out of a sensible place, right? But I know even in the workplace, I think I was doing a session for some women, like maybe like a few years ago, and it was a group of quite senior women, and even in that group, some of them still had that view of you just need to like get your head down and work hard in order to get along. So a lot of people hear that sort of advice, as long as I just get in, get my head down, do my work, I'm not here to make friends, right? Something a lot of people say. Why can that be damaging in terms of advice, in terms of how to get ahead? And why does it sometimes actually impact people from underrepresented backgrounds more so? So why is it particularly damaging sometimes for those people if they want progression in their careers?
So I don't think it's fair for me to talk about everyone, but I'll talk about my experience, which is something I often tend to lean on, and I take a lot of pride in actually knowing I'm in a position now where I can probably talk a lot more openly about some experience and feelings than some people in an organisation can do. So I try to take that opportunity wherever I can. And I come from a Zambian African strong heritage where academic excellence is everything and Black excellence is a big thing. And that same message was given in terms of you need to work 10 times as hard as the next guy or the white guy next to you to get the same thing.
10 times. Yeah.
It might be even more, right?
Not 2 times, 10 times.
10 times. Listen, that's exactly how it's going. And I think I agree with what you said. Like the intention, that is right. But the frame that I always have in my mind is, what do I take from that? And what's the message that if that's what I was given that I want to give to my kids? I've got 2 young kids, one's 8 and one's 6. And actually, I don't want to give them that same message because the reality is everybody's working hard. And the places that we aspire these kids to get to, like hard work is part of the entrance fee. It's just going to get you into the door. The people that are really kicking on and making a difference are working hard and they're working smart. The other thing that I think in terms of that mindset, as you get your head down to work hard, is it stops you capitalizing on the things that make brilliant organizations work. And that's about collaboration. That's about connection. That's about communication. In that sort of mindset, you focus on the things that you can do by yourself. You keep things to yourself. You don't share information in a way that makes sense. You don't bring or call people in to solve issues and problems. And what I've seen from the brilliant organizations that I've worked for, and as I said at the beginning, it's the people that's the secret sauce, and actually being able to share issues or challenges, how things get done. And I know there's been times in my career where I didn't do that as well as I could. And that was the lesson I really had to learn and work hard to be able to make sure I take it on board. So what I've seen and what I've experienced is the people that really do get on, they're sharing issues or challenges. They're working with the best people to address them. And actually it's that collective spirit that gives them a unique advantage. And as they sort of figure that out, what they're learning is how do they ask for help in a way that's going to benefit everybody and not necessarily just them? How in difficult or tough situations do they bring the level of clarity and direction so people can get on board? You talked about the relationships piece earlier on. If you've got an issue or a challenge, how do you then get people infused to want to spend their time, effort and energy to be able to address it? And as I sort of think about my own career, I think for a long time I had this understanding or thinking of what like corporate success might look like for somebody like me. And I probably lean too hard into the skills or talents that you see or think people get recognized for, whether it's about the numbers, the strategic success, having to turn up in a particular way. I had a mentor one time that actually looked at me and sort of said, like, your skills and talents sit in that being able to infuse, connect people around an issue or challenge and that energy. If people comment on that being a skill or talent of yours, like, don't put it in the bin and focus on being seen as that brilliant strategic mind, which I do believe I'm great at. How do you capitalize on those energies so it allows you to swim with the current of your power? And actually at that point, even like some of the roles I was sort of focused on doing, some of the challenges I was having at that point was, are you doing the right type of roles, or is this the right type of organization for you to be successful using your strengths? Those are difficult conversations to start to engage in. But those were the type of conversations that really helped me think differently about how can I or could I position myself to use my skills to the best of my ability? And going back to that question, that's the challenge. If you're head down, focused all the time, you miss what's going on. And as a result of that, it's so easy to be so insular in terms of your hopes, your aspirations, and not realizing how you can connect what you're trying to do to what's valuable in the organization that pays you, to what the priorities of that organization are. So you can then start to demonstrate your value, which is what the issue or the challenge is. So just being able to lift your head up a little bit can make such a significant difference.
And I want to play devil's advocate a little bit, because what you said that one thing that you said, people that progress in organizations or that get ahead, they're not only working hard, they're doing, sort of like other things in terms of, how they apply their skills. But I know that I think there'll be some people watching this today that will be thinking, there's some people that get promoted and they're not even working hard. Like, let's be honest about it, right? Some people are just very good at being quite strategic in terms of who they build relationships with, and their visibility with individuals that do hold those decisions around who gets promoted, etc. So they're very good, almost like at networking their way to progression. So I just maybe wanted to talk to you about the importance of almost like that relationship building side of things. In fact, what I want to do is that there was something in the news. There's been a little bit of noise around. So Emma Grede, if anybody's into the Emma Grede podcast, Emma Grede, the co-founder of Skims and Good American, it often comes under a lot of fire, actually, for some of the things that she says about work-life balance. But one of the things she said recently is that if you want to get ahead in your career, you have to go into the office, because otherwise you become invisible, right? And so I just want to get your thoughts on it. It kind of links to this thing around the importance of the relationship building and or the proximity. Just what are your thoughts on that? And anybody in the comments as well, if you want to get ahead in work, do you have to get yourself in the office, right? People will know what my views are. I'm very tough love and old school on this, right? Yeah, and what are your thoughts on this?
So where's the reality? Like, the world has changed, particularly since the pandemic, in terms of how people see or view that. But the reality is, if you ask somebody the question, will being in the office surrounded by the people that are making choices about your career hopes and aspirations, and then being able to build relationships with you in person versus online, have an impact on your outcomes? And most people, I think, would say, I assume, yes. Is it fair? No, it's not necessary. And actually, if I sort of think about some unique advantages I had in the workplace or the organisation I work for, I've always lived in the north. I went to university in Leeds. I met my wife in Leeds. We started a family in Leeds. I had a very short conversation with her about moving to London, because that would have suited me from a work perspective. And in my mind, as a dentist, she could have worked wherever she wanted to work. She said no, and that was the end of that conversation. But as a result of that, our relationship was always a case of she really supported me to be away and to be able to build a career in that perspective. The other thing that I was really lucky about was the organisation I worked for invested in me. That they made it possible for me to take roles in the office. They sponsored and paid for my travel and accommodation. If I'm honest, it's not a practice that I know they do in the same way now for lots of sensible reasons, and I completely get it. But that gave me a real opportunity to build a career in the office, but still get to live in the north. And that had a big impact on how I was able to navigate things and get things done. So I think Emma's got a point. The reality is, like, not everybody can do that. And most organizations are in positions now where they are trying their best to find opportunities to make it possible for people to get into roles and to find that hybrid working, right? But if I was to advise anybody that really wants to go a long way, like, it might help you. Like, life is sometimes about sacrifices as well, right? And I think it's really difficult to sort of think or assume that you can have everything on your own terms. So depending on the industry that you choose to work in, depending on the type of roles that you aspire to do in the future, you might have to make some difficult choices that allow you to achieve those things. And that's part of the life and the work game that we all need to understand and potentially negotiate. I mean, going back to your point though, right? And what that bit around working hard or working smart, when I sort of think about the common enemy of the community that I'm building, for me, like the thing that bands us together is the unwritten rules. The most important lessons about work aren't written down on pieces of paper, they're passed down in conversation. So you need to be in the right spaces at the right time to access that. The other thing I'd push you back a little bit on as well is, I'm here. Like, if you want to moan a bitch about the situation and come and talk to us about the fact that, that person gets this job because they do this or they do that and they're not doing that, don't mind that. And it's important to get it off your chest, right? But again, coming back to how do I intend to deal with my kids, for example, in that situation, which is often a barometer of how I might treat other people. I don't want to hear them complaining about the things they don't know what somebody else is doing. Because what I see is there's also this bit around the unseen miles. Often those people that we assume aren't doing the work are probably doing a lot of things that we just don't see. And that's the thing that I pride us in being able to do in our community is how do we help people to understand and see those unseen miles so they can take them themselves? Because actually, as soon as we've been enlightened, we might start to invest in ourselves and how we build relationships or how we choose things in a way that makes a big difference. And that level that we always come back to, I think the thing that is missing is often context. If you're in those spaces, going back into the office, you get the context that's potentially missing that allows you just to make better choices about your career, which can have a significant impact on your outcomes as well. So there's benefits and there's choices, and with choices sometimes there's downsides. So make sure you know the game you're playing, right?
Yeah, I like that. The unseen miles. I like that. There is, you know what I mean? Because here's the thing, because sometimes when somebody gets promoted or they're slotted into a role, sometimes people are like, I didn't even see that role advertised. Like they're like, the role wasn't advertised, nobody was. So all of a sudden somebody's been moved into a position, and as you say, sometimes you don't know, you don't really understand the context, you don't really know what they've done to get there, etc. So yeah, really interesting. A point here from Sylvia. To add to your point, Cheryl, of some people progressing strategically, what about talented people from diverse backgrounds who might carry trauma, which does not make them feel safe to be visible? Okay, so it's like an interesting, your thoughts on that? Yeah, that's an interesting perspective, right?
I agree. But I sort of think about the community that I'm building, like I generally believe people from underrepresented, underserved backgrounds and everybody else will carry different levels of trauma in different situations.
Yeah.
I think what's often a shame, though, is most people don't talk openly and honestly about the things that matter the most to them, particularly in the workspace. There's human issues that I often sort of see, whether it's fear, shame, that cause real discomforts in terms of how people address or think about asking for the help, the support, or just being really honest about their goals and aspirations. A part of my work right now is how do you create the safe spaces where people can explore that effectively so they can move with clarity and confidence where it matters in their workplace, in their home, in their community. But all those things that I mentioned there, like those same people with that trauma can still do the same thing. And for me, I think what I often try to think is how do we help people create the space and time to think more intentionally about what is it they're trying to achieve. In the community or the space that we're building, like we have a real focus on three key things. Like the first one is around actually how do you elevate people's self-awareness, and that could be like genuinely understanding who you are, why you are like you are, and as a result of that, how do you show up in life? In a big chunk of life we're working, but with that, can you start to have some genuine clarity around your values, your hopes, your aspirations, and those goals? And it always was interesting to me as I started doing this work, and particularly podcasting and speaking to more people. You see a big difference in people that have had very high level coaching and education, or executive support, or therapy. People that have had the space and time to really explore themselves is a unique advantage that helps people think about what they're trying to achieve. And then the flip side of that, the amount of people that I see that haven't had the opportunity to explore or understand their values are walking around upset, pissed off, because the values that they haven't named are being compromised by the way they live or the way that they work. So starting to help people through that can be really valuable. The second thing is, how do you help people to understand or build a level of business or organizational savviness? You know, how do you help people to get how power, privilege, and politics work in the place that pay you? Who's making choices and decisions that have an impact on your hopes and aspirations from a work perspective? Number one, do you understand them? Can you then potentially align to them or challenge them? Can you influence them? And sometimes you can't, right? If you can't influence them and they're negatively impacting you, are you willing to tolerate them, and how long can you tolerate them for? And if you can't, what are you going to do that allows you to get into a space that allows you to thrive and be successful? And I think when you've got those two things sorted out, you've got a better level of understanding around that, you can then start to focus on visibility and influence. And I think a lot of the time that comes up as personal branding or whatever you want to call it. But for me, that's around making strategic choices about what do you want to work on? Who do you want to work with? What are you trying to achieve? And why is it important to you? And then I think if you get to that point, you can then actually start to be strategic. So that networking is networking with purpose. If you've got gaps in terms of your knowledge and understanding, you can ask real questions. You can seek mentors. You can build those relationships in a way that people genuinely understand why. That takes time. And the industry that I've worked in is life sciences. And again, I think it attracts a very special breed of people. Like, and it's the same in most spaces, but I've got a special affinity for people in the life sciences sector. Most people are doing work which in one way or another will have an impact on saving or improving lives. And as a result of that, people give so much of themselves to the work. Like they go 110% if you can do that, whatever the case might be. But actually those people that are starting to make those differences, those people that are I've got access to those unwritten rules. These people that are doing the unseen miles, often they're able to save 20% of the time to really think about, how do I work on myself? How do I plan and invest in my career? How can I be really generous in terms of what I deliver to organizations, but at the same time be a little bit selfish and think about how can I use this organization as a vehicle for my success? Because if you do that, you'll deliver value for that business and that company. But again, that takes space and time to do it. And often people don't protect that time. It's the type of thing that I'm really passionate about, helping people think differently about.
Yeah. I want to, a few things that you said there really sort of talk about just the mindset that people, when people are thinking about their careers like longer term, there is something about like a mindset shift. And some of the things you talked about there in terms of understanding and potentially behaving in a way, I don't say behaving in a way that's political, but there's something about the word like political and understanding power and all of that. People make the assumption that it's you've either got to behave unethically, or, you know, a term that I heard once used in a workshop where we were talking about this very thing in terms of, you know, building relationships more strategically, depending on what you want to achieve. People sort of use the term icky, like almost like, oh, it gives me the ick that I've got to behave in a certain way, or I've got to, you know, kind of, you know, get to know that particular person just because I want to, you know, get ahead. There's something about, I think for some people, they see it as like a negative thing. I don't know if that's something you've come across. You know, they almost like see that these other things that you potentially have to do outside of just doing your work, that there is like something negative about that. So how do you kind of like change that mindset for those individuals and get them to see that that stuff, certainly in terms of, especially if you want promotion, that stuff is really important?
For some people I can't and I won't. I think the reality is there's a level of maturity that you've got to have around the way the world operates and works for you to be able to engage and make a difference. So you can have discussions, you can present opportunities, but if you genuinely believe you're going to achieve everything that you want on your own terms alone, you're going to have to be super talented, have a lot of resources and a lot of things going on for you. But if you come in from the perspective where actually maybe you haven't got those privileges, you might need to think a little bit differently. What I do think is, if something's icky, don't do it. But that's you, right? Like, you need to sort of think about what's driving that ick and how do you understand it. We talk about networking with purpose. So often I think one of the best ways to network is to network based on a goal or objective or something that you're trying to achieve. And actually sometimes being as clever as defining that goal, that problem statement, or that opportunity starts to help people to build the right level of clarity. Once you've done that, how do you then start to map out who effectively can enable you or needs to be part or close to this work so you can achieve that success? And like literally map it on the grid. So you're looking to sort of say, right, who has a high level impact in terms of being able to help and support and get this thing done? How much do they like me, or how much do they care about me being able to do this thing? And if you map out those relationships on a grid, you can then start to think about, well, what are the choices that we have here? You might have loads of people that like you, that can't have an impact on the end goal, but you're spending all your time with those people that like you. Don't get rid of those people. That encouragement can be really important, but you need to think about how you're going to change how you're spending your time to achieve the goal. You may well have a number of people that have got a massive impact on that output, but actually they just don't know enough about you to be able to affect, to support change. So actually, how do you start to build or invest in those relationships? And how can you start to think about how you explain what you're trying to achieve in a way that gets them on board and builds that relationship? That's not icky, but if you go to that person with the clarity and help them to understand, and there's a mutual benefit there, all of a sudden people will be invested. There may well be some people that are really important in terms of getting that thing, but actually they either don't know or don't like you. You have to manage that. And that might be around, how do I build a better relationship with that person? Or how do I circumvent that person? And how can I use the rest of my network to be able to get this thing done? And for me, that's the strategic element of it. And that to me is some of the unseen miles that I talked about earlier on. Some people think it's icky. Some people think it's conceited. My opinion is, when you sit down and you pay people the respect to do the work and think about what is it we're trying to achieve and why is it important to you, that's respectful. Those are the unseen miles that allow you to speak to somebody with clarity that then gets them to buy into who you are and what you're trying to achieve. Most of us are trying to market or sell something, and we would happily sit down and do exactly the same situation or process for a brand or a product. how do we make ourselves the brand of the product? And how do we
Yeah.
think about driving our relationships in the same way?
Yeah. Well, do you know what? Well, I mean, there's this saying, right? Life is a sales pitch. Life is a sales pitch. And it sounded, what you were describing there sounds a bit like, anybody that's worked with me knows I love a 2x2 matrix, right?
It is.
So it's a 2x2 matrix of your stakeholders, the ones that have got influence up one axis and allyship, or, you know, the level to which you know them and they're a supporter on the other axis, and a high and a low. And yeah, if you can map them out, that kind of like starts to give you a little bit of a roadmap. I think with the whole thing with the ick as well, the one thing that I said to somebody that once about this was, have you got the ick because it's going, you believe it's going against a value, right? So do you know, so there might be something about that in terms of your ethics, right? And so you just want to check in with that. Or actually, is it just that it's outside of your comfort zone? Because actually, growth does not live in the comfort zone. Right? So there's just an element of, if it's just because there's a little bit of a discomfort because maybe you're not comfortable, you know, with creating relationships with people that you don't know, particularly if they're more senior, actually that is just calling out that there is a skill gap, potentially a skill and or a knowledge gap. Let me just dive into the comments really quickly here. So first of all from Sylvan. So catch-22, the hardest challenge for people with trauma is to feel safe to express themselves. Absolutely. So that was back to the point we were discussing the thing around trauma. About behaving unethically, two perspectives. I've seen enough people progress through extracting or taking or stealing ideas from other people. I've certainly had my work and ideas stolen this way through my career. And for people from racialized backgrounds, the performance of a lot of the icky is performing whiteness, which can be self-harm. That is so interesting. Yeah. Your thoughts on that? Yeah, let's just pause. Let's just pause on that. What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a really astute observation. And it goes back to the first thing I said. If it's giving you the ick, investigate and think about why is it giving you the ick, and don't do it. Like, from my perspective, the reason I always sort of advocate to do that time to plan effectively is so that you know and you're really clear what is it you're trying to achieve and how can you be authentic in terms of that proposition. And that's where that starts. You need to be really proud of your ask. And actually, in that case, if somebody says no to you, you've done the work and that's fine. You move on. Or maybe you don't. And you persist and you think about how do I change the ask to make sure that we get the output, because I believe the output is so valuable. But I think the ick is because we're conditioned to want to try and be something else to get what we want. What I've seen over and over again though, is people respond to authenticity. They respond to realness. There's lots of different pictures around what does vulnerability look like in the world right now, but actually often like being able to explain to somebody, this is an issue that I'm experiencing right now. This is the impact it's potentially having. This is the help and the support I need. And the reason I'm asking for you is X, Y, and Z. And I think if we manage to get this thing done, this is the impact it'll have for me, for us. Intrinsically, humans are built to want to help other people. My bit is actually how do we find the ways where we can call people in the right way? And you can't do it for everybody. That guy just sort of said about there's bad actors, people stealing work, claiming work, and those things happen. I think it's really important when those do happen to you, you advocate for yourself, you stand up for yourself, and we have those situations all the time. But if you're in an organization where that's commonplace and it's happened to you, it's not your organization. It's not the message that everyone wants to hear right now. I know it's a difficult world, like it's hard getting jobs, but actually if that's the type of space that you're working in, genuinely I'd really question and ask people to sort of think about, can you take your skills, your capability and apply it somewhere that isn't commonplace? And I think that's some of what we need to help people think about.
Yeah, definitely. I just want to really just pause on this point around the building relationships and that strategic relationship building and the performing whiteness, because I think Adrian raises a really useful point. And I think a lot of people, because this is where the whole code switching comes from, right? People, especially from racialized backgrounds, think that that's what they have to do. They almost think, actually, the way that I'm going to fit in and get along with these people is I have to start pretending to be I have to speak a certain way. I have to do X, Y, and Z. There's something you said in there about authenticity. And sometimes when I'm speaking to people and sort of like working around this topic, there are a couple of examples that I use, but there's one particular example. I won't say his name, right? But if anybody knows me and they know my circle a little bit, there's an individual who is an award-winning management consultant, very, very sort of like early stage in his career. He's Gen Z, right? He's a Gen Zer. He comes from inner city Birmingham, right? From a single parent, working class background. And he works at one of the big four as a management consultant and is award winning. And when he tells me his story of when even when he went in for interview, you know, and what he wore and everything, which was jeans and trainers because it was snowing, and he was worried about falling over, right? And this is big force, this is glossy offices, right? And when you meet this guy, and he's now been there for a few years, he is as authentic as can be, right? You could quite easily, you know, you could quite easily speak to him and think, you know, what does this guy do? Like, does he just like, you know, stand on road or whatever, right? He sort of just has that kind of very, very authentic. But I tell you what, and I say this, I've introduced him to my wider network to collaborate on various initiatives and things like that. And I've seen him in his consultant mode. So I've seen him delivering work. And so for one thing, he's the same person all the way through when he's delivering and when you're talking to him socially. And he's completely authentic. But the other thing I would say is he's fantastic at building relationships as his authentic self. So to your point, Adrian, that I think there is a skill in it, and maybe this is something that you get into as part of 29K Club and the Black Sherpa, but there is absolutely a way to do it without putting on a performance and being somebody that you're not, right? Would you agree with that? Yeah.
100%. I think there's definitely a skill to it, but some of that skill is actually how do you make yourself relatable? I'll be honest, like the whole idea of like code switching, like I I grew up in a place called Grimsby. I was like the only black person for miles around. All of my friends are white. My wife is white. I've got two beautiful mixed race kids, but actually I've grown up in an environment where diversity to me came when I went to university, and then I started mixing with more black people, for example, outside of my family. I often sort of think that whole idea of code switching is natural in many ways. And as a result of that, I think you try and be like whatever's around you. That's relatively normal. The challenge with code switching is when it's enforced and it has like a detrimental toll. But actually, I still think there's something in being able to choose to be a certain way to be able to achieve an objective. And it's relatively natural to pivot, to think actually for a situation, for a conversation, for whatever's going on, how do I help my friend or the person I'm trying to talk to relate to the issue or the challenge? That's got to be done, I think, on your terms in a way that's not detrimental to who you are. And I think you can do that, not inauthentic. There is a big difference between that whole idea of code switching to sort of say, I'm going to change my voice because actually people don't want to hear my voice. Sometimes that happens. And actually nobody said that we don't want to hear your voice. So can we test and try that in a way that makes sense? And again, that's testing the environment. So it's a big and complex situation here. But I think the challenge that I'd always want to sort of position is how do we move away from the assumptions that force us to potentially code switch, which when it's not necessarily been asked for. And then if we are in a situation that we are being forced to code switch, I go back to that bit. Why do we want to be in that situation? How do we potentially change it? And how do we help and support people through that? The real situations though.
Yeah. The other thing I would say as well, actually, to add on to this, and I think anybody that's maybe interested in that aspect in particular, there's a really good somebody called Carla Harris who's done a TED talk. And she talks about this in terms of in her own career. So her background is it was either Morgan Stanley or JP Morgan, and I can never remember which one. But one of the things she talks about in terms of sometimes when you feel that you have to change to become a different person in order to fit in, one of the learnings that she talks about is actually she learned that actually by revealing more about herself, there were then more ways to build rapport with somebody, because actually if you reveal, actually, you know, I've got these interests, I do this, there's more chance actually that you're going to probably find something that connects, like you were saying, the relatability. So something that connects with that person, because actually you've revealed more of yourself, if that makes sense. And it feels counterintuitive, but there's a lot of sense around it. So actually she was almost like, lean into that, like lean into your full self and actually reveal more. And you might be surprised actually at where that leads to in terms of connection on that kind of like human level. Morgan Stanley Thank you so much,
In
Wadzi.
the chat.
Yeah,
Well done,
Morgan.
Wadzi.
Yeah. And her career advice is just incredible, right? Yeah, interesting. And let me just go on to this point here that Sylvia's written as well. One thing is to intellectually understand that they have to step forward, and another is to feel safe enough to do it. Absolutely. And yes, self-awareness and inner work is the key. At what point is the responsibility of the company to invest in employee self-development in the same way we develop applied and strategic skills? So I guess a really important question then, maybe sort of like just leads us into, I guess, the reason that you built 29K Club and just the role that it plays and how it complements what organizations can do, etc. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that and the model, this whole like community and social learning and the role that that plays?
Yeah. So often I think of the 29K Club as an organizational employee resource group at scale and across an industry. We want to build the most trusted development community in the world one day, but we're starting in the UK and we're starting in life sciences because that's where I have a personal story. We focus on ways that we enable people to build the type of clarity and confidence in a safe space that allows them to move with that same clarity and confidence where it counts, and that might be in their home, in the community, or within their organization. And we do that with the power of community. Intention is actually the business, the Black Sherpa, is a consultancy, as I said, that helps people or organizations with culture, people, and performance. But when I left, I thought long and hard about, how do I strategically find a position in this industry? There's so many people doing brilliant work as consultants here, and what's going to make me different? So I made a choice to spend 80% of my time since I left building something called the 29K Club, which is really invested in addressing those issues that we've talked about, the unseen miles, about the unwritten rules. And ultimately, I wanted a space where if you've not been invested in that way, if you've maybe not been as lucky to have the managers that support enable you, and it's not just about managers. I always sort of think about how do you give onus and empowerment to the individual. So I wanted a place that is affordable for people to invest in themselves. So we charge £75 a month plus VAT for membership, and that's not cheap for everybody, but actually for what people get, I think it's super valuable. What do they get? They get access to my weird ramblings and insights, and also the tools and resources that we use for people's development. We promise at least 2 masterclasses on the unwritten curriculum. So I think as we look at most organizations, there's so many elements of strategic leadership and holistic development of people that doesn't necessarily happen all the time. Most organizations, L&D functions are dwindling. Training has moved to be really quick and specific to deliver a particular outcome, but I don't think there's as much around the soft skills. So we are making space and time to, one, deliver that, but also hold space for the big and important conversations that don't always happen in the organization. So if you're in those rooms, if you're on those programs, you're getting it, but actually in this space, you can get access to it yourself. But then the third thing that we do that is so powerful is we host weekly group mentoring sessions, and we're very specific that our focus is on mentoring and not coaching. But in those spaces, we're creating that safe space for people to learn from and engage in real people's real issues, real challenges, and real solutions. So as simple as that check-in, but then from that check-in across a room of 10 people max, we'll sort of say, what are people working towards or working through, and can we deep dive into one of them? And for the person that's lucky enough to get the hot seat, the promise for them is clarity. But they will empty their head of whatever's going on. They don't even need to make sense or be coherent. Just tell us what the issue is, what the challenge is, where the pain is, why it's important to you. And then for everybody else in that conversation, I have to encourage them to say, like, today, you don't need to be Superwoman or Superman. You don't need to save this person. You don't need to fix them. They're not broken. But for the next 20, 25 minutes, you get to practice some of life's most important skills. What is your listening like? What is your questioning like? What is your problem solving and creative thinking? So we ask questions to explore that issue or challenge or topic in a way that brings more clarity to everybody. And then once we've done that, everybody gets the opportunity to share their perspectives on the conversation, personal experiences that might help or support that individual, whether they were positive or negative. And then in addition to that, they can share tools or resources. The individual gets a solid write-up of what's happened, so they can look at that and make choices about what do I want to do next and what help or support might I need. And then for the rest of the community and through my blog, I share like the aggregated lessons in a way that everybody can access it. And what's beautiful about that is those same lessons can so usually be applied to most individuals as something that they're potentially going through, or they can use those insights to support people close to them in their home, in their workplace, or I think most importantly, particularly for underrepresented and underserved people, you might be dealing or have access to an issue or a situation that you're not facing now, but you might come across a year, 2 years down the line. And when that happens, you don't freeze. You've got a framework that you can reference that allows you to feel a little bit more familiar with that situation. Or the community bit comes in, you can reach back to that person and say, we talked about that thing, this happened, what happened next in your story, and how could you potentially help me? And again, people are helping in the most powerful way and supporting people through this. And I think the one thing more than anything, we said earlier on about the whole idea, like people struggle to ask for help or to call people in this situation. You see it on people's faces when somebody brings up a topic and people look around going, this one's for me. I'm so happy that person said this because I'm dealing with something so similar myself. And as a result of that, people are so invested. And it's a skill or a tool that I'd always used in my leadership development. So often the answers are in the room. So for internal programs, it's worked so well previously. What I was interested when I started experimenting with this is how does it work when you've got different people, different organizations, different cultures. And I think there's a really special thing that happens without having a teammate or somebody from your organization necessarily in the room. People all of a sudden open up in a way that's very different, probably a little bit more honest with that context. And it builds that same psychological safety that we've sort of seen come up in a few places. And that is my job, right? It's to be able to protect that psychological safety, that connection fiercely. And by making sure that we have the right people as part of our community, the right practices, and we all make sure that we honour that effectively.
Yeah. And that's, one of the things that we talked about before we came on air was that you can operate in a space that ERGs can't really go into always, right, in their organisations, which is what makes it, I think, makes it so interesting and valuable. So
hopefully, and in the best possible way, we don't necessarily have the same politics or ties to be able to think about and explore and deal with things. I think today we've got like our 22nd masterclass that we've done since we opened in September, and today's going to be very different. Actually, we've got an amazing lady coming in to talk to us about breath work, about posture, about energy, which for me again goes back to that holistic bit. It's so easy to sort of think about the session should be about what does your power presentation look like, how do you have a difficult conversation with your manager, but actually all of that stuff doesn't matter if you can't control yourself, your energy. So I'm really enjoying being able to explore different topics and situations based on the needs of the community, but we're building a library of such valuable content that I know other people will benefit from. And genuinely, like we write all of them up through the blog. So if you go to theblacksherpa.com /blog, you can see the sessions that we're going. And I'm really passionate about making sure that we share the frameworks, the insights in a way that's free and accessible. Like to be in the community, you get access to the conversation and the connection and the expert. But actually, there's so many people I know won't be able to necessarily afford that fee. So at that point or this point, that's one of the ways that we can potentially pay forward some of those insights in a way that's valuable to other people as well.
Amazing. We're wrapping up now, so I'm going to be digging into our final question, which is going to be the one thing that we can do different, because this whole tap on the shoulder thing really is I was having a conversation with somebody this week who was telling me about the fact that a role is being created for them, which is the ultimate, isn't it? When your organization understands your value, the skills you bring, all of that stuff, such that they are literally creating a role for you. So there is, we know that things like this happen. We know that people get a tap on the shoulder to be invited to apply for a role or whatever it might be. And, all of the things that we've talked about affect who gets that tap on the shoulder. So what, if I were to ask you, what is the one thing that companies can do to kind of disrupt all of those like informal mechanisms that sometimes go on to that kind of shape who gets along and who doesn't? Is there anything that the companies should be doing, I guess, to make the system a little bit more, equitable, transparent, meritocratic, all of those things? What are your thoughts?
It's a tough question. And again, I don't know if my answer is going to be what you want, but the tap on the shoulder is not going to go away. The tap on the shoulder stays, right? And actually, I think sometimes tap on the shoulder is relatively fair. I think it should be given when people have worked really hard to position themselves for an opportunity. I know that can grate in terms of actually how do you make sure the processes are inclusive of everybody. But for me, I think that's the thing. The problem isn't the tap. It's that not everybody gets seen to have the opportunity to get that tap. And for me, that's what we potentially change or what organizations can invest in. And that might look like, how do we make sure that opportunities are clear, so people genuinely understand what does good look like when you're positioning yourself for something like this, or how do you move up in this organization? How do you make sure there's an opportunity in a conversation helping people to continue to understand the unwritten rules or the unseen mile? So if somebody's had that tap, like, let's celebrate the work that they've done and make it really visible, so people can see, if I work in that way, this is the reward that you can potentially get, but allow people to follow in a way that makes sense. I think there's opportunities to think really hard about, how do we try not to leave it to chance in terms of that whole idea about being lucky? How do you create career progression pathways that people can understand and build towards over time, and start to think about how we're demonstrating the skills, the competencies in a way that's genuinely visible, and make that part of the important conversations that people should be having with their managers and broader stakeholders in their development. Although I always have that mindset around, don't leave that to chance with the manager. As an individual, how do you make that part of your job to create and make that easy for your manager to potentially engage with? And then I think the last bit is, like, genuinely do the work to pay attention to who's getting access and opportunities in your organization. There should be data around that, but when you've got big projects, or even sort of as simple as understanding who's getting face time with senior leaders in your organization, track it, like, make it a conversation point as part of your development, part of your culture. Think very differently about how are we measuring what this potentially looks like, and actually it's those opportunities for conversations that make a big difference. Particularly, even coming back to the point you made earlier on, like, those people in the office are going to get potentially more of those opportunities because of proximity. If you are an organization where you're disparate and you're spread in different places or locations, what are the things that you're deliberately going to do to create the space and time for talent that doesn't have that opportunity to be close to it? So I always sort of come back to that thing around its proximity, its context, and anything that we can do to share the missing context can have such an impact on talent to, again, make them think very differently about what are they willing to do, what are they willing to choose, what are they willing even potentially to sacrifice to be able to add more value to the organization, and them to achieve more in return as a result of that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, some really good advice there. The tap on the shoulder, it's probably never going to go away, partly because we are people, right? There are humans involved in these processes, and wherever there are humans, there are going to be processes that kind of like circumvent standard processes. I am aware of one company, and I keep meaning to dig into this, but I'm aware of a company that actually implemented a scheme called the tap on the shoulder. But what they were trying to do was make sure that everybody that had been in, for example, the same role for, say, 3 years, that they all, the managers were encouraged to have a conversation with all of them about their aspirations. Do you know what I mean? To try to kind of level the playing field a little bit more. But as you say, lots of different ways that organizations can maybe try to take some of the mystery out of, what the opportunities are, how you go about them, who's getting access, etc., to make things a little bit fairer, shall we say?
So, I suppose as with that tap on the shoulder bit, Shell, before you jump off, just goes back to that question that I keep seeing at the top of the screen. The opportunity is to position yourself for opportunity. That's the work that people need to think and do. And that's the bit that you can control to an extent. And we can only focus our time and efforts on the things that we can control and influence. So that's the challenge. It's actually, how do you do that work that would give you more opportunity? And that's where you can potentially have more fun along the way, more success, more connection, and make better choices that enable and support you.
Where can people find out more about what you do, 29K and Black Sherpa, and connect with you and all of that? Are you mainly on LinkedIn, or are you on Insta, or what?
So LinkedIn for the business stuff. If you're really desperate to see pictures of the family and stuff that's going on with the dog or whatever else, fine. Feel free to connect me on Instagram. I should be doing more stuff on those platforms, but for the most part, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm always available, so drop me an email, drop me a DM. You can also find me at theblacksherpa.com. So I'd love to connect with more people. I'd love to share more about the work that we're doing, and if there's opportunities to support other people, then we're definitely here for that as well.
Absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for your time, and for everybody that was watching and that stayed with us through the whole conversation. Thank you so much. And if you're watching us on the replay, thank you for taking 59 minutes out of your day to join us in this conversation. Thanks again,
My pleasure.
All right, have a good weekend, everyone.